You might be here because you've just had your first period, or maybe you haven't, or maybe you've been having periods for 20 years. Whatever the reason, welcome. We know periods are something that are often seen as gross or weird to talk about. In Western cultures, it's common practice to hide the fact you've had your first period or just simply not talk about it. It might be interesting for you to know, however, that in some cultures, your first period is actually celebrated. On the 4th day of your first period in Fiji, for example, Tanundra is a day where families prepare a feast for the lucky girl to celebrate her entry to womanhood. This also occurs in some South Indian tribes, where a ceremony is held to celebrate this coming-of-age moment. It's important to know, however, that there is still a huge stigma surrounding periods. An example of this is in TV ads for period products. Period blood is often shown as blue. We all know that blood isn't blue, but can be literally any colour in your period, from bright red to dark red to light pink to brown. We want these colours to be shown on TV, not blue. We hope this video, amongst other videos on this channel, will help you explore more about your body and what's actually going on within it. We're not afraid to get our hands a little bit dirty in the process. So without further ado, let's get into the science of why your first period happens. We wanted to start off by saying a little something about the words first period. Scientifically, it's actually called MENarche, although we think it should maybe be called womenarche, but that's a whole other story. Your first period didn't just spontaneously occur. It's part of a cycle that's been going on in your body for at least a couple of weeks before you get it. This cycle is called the menstrual cycle. There's another word beginning with men. Why? Why is it not your menstrual cycle? Okay, we admit that's a pretty long word and maybe isn't the best candidate for a name change. The men part of menarche and menstrual cycle doesn't actually derive from, well, the word men. It actually comes from mene, the Latin and Greek word for moon. But what does a massive rock orbiting our planet have to do with our period? The clue is in the cyclical nature of the lunar cycle. It's long been said that the moon or lunar cycle syncs up with women's menstrual cycles. Although this has long been disproven, it's an awesome coincidence that the average length of a menstrual cycle and of the cycle of the moon is around the same number of days. If you were to look up into the night sky over a period of about 4 weeks, you'd be able to see the moon changing in phase. Every 29.5 days, the moon waxes and wanes, from being a full, bright circle to being basically imperceptible. Coincidentally, the average length of a period is about 28 days too. Just like a moon cycle, your body goes through changes throughout the month, but cycles through these changes back to where it started. Cool, right? Before we go into what is actually happening during this menstrual cycle, it's useful to know that at first, your cycles might not be as regular as every month. You might have some cycles which last a lot longer, or even shorter than that. You might skip a couple of cycles. It can take a while for your body to get into rhythm, and that's totally okay. For simplicity's sake, however, we're going to think of our cycles as exactly 28 days. Just remember that this is not a static number. When you're younger, regular cycles can be anything from around 21 to 45 days, but you can be even more irregular than that at first. Okay, so let's imagine you've just got your first period. Firstly, congratulations. You've now started a new cycle, and therefore you're on day 1. Every day from now on will be known as day 2, day 3, day 4, and so on. Every time you get your period, you'll reset back to day 1, and the cycle will continue. But what events have led up to this moment? We're going to time travel now, backwards from the moment you realise you've got your period. If this was your first period, 28 days ago you didn't have it. Yet something totally crazy, and in our opinion incredibly cool, was happening inside your body. We're going to make a bold assumption and say you have a belly button. Working backwards from your belly button, you've got a whole lot going on inside. If we were to open you up like a book, we'd first see your small intestines and your bladder. The small intestines kind of look like an incredibly long sausage coiled up, and that's because they are pretty long. Behind that, nestled away, is your reproductive system, and damn is that thing fine. We like to think of it as a funky-looking headless alien. You can take your pick what you think. The body is the uterus, and that's where a lot of the action is going to be taking place. That's also where you, as a baby, were held hostage for 9 months in your mother. The arms coming out of the sides of the body are known as the fallopian tubes, and their fingers are like soft feathers kind of brushing up against those 2 almond-sized balls. Those 2 almond-sized balls are called ovaries. 28 days ago, on day 1 of your previous cycle, little sacs were starting to grow on those ovaries. Those tiny sacs are called follicles, and each contains a little immature egg starting to mature. These follicles grow as each tiny little egg begins to mature over a period, and this lasts about 5 days. So just think, whilst you were watching Netflix, your ovaries were busy giving some tiny little egg cells all their attention. Around 5 days after those follicles begin to develop, one single egg is chosen. All the other egg cells, which were busy beginning to mature, are absorbed back into the ovary. All the attention is now on this single egg. We're going to call it the chosen egg. And boy, does the chosen egg get all the attention. It's basically like the only child of the ovary now. Its follicle can grow up to 1 centimeter. Yes, 1 centimeter. As the follicle grows, with the chosen egg within it, it begins to release a chemical messenger called estrogen. Estrogen travels to the uterus, where it tells it to get ready to host a potentially fertilized egg. This potentially fertilized egg would then grow into a baby. You might not be ready to be pregnant just yet, but your uterus will have other plans in mind. It begins to build the uterine lining, creating a warm, cushy home made up of soft tissue and rich with blood to supply nutrients. Around day 14, halfway through your cycle, the chosen egg is ready. The follicle bursts open and releases it, and it's grabbed by the feathery fingers of the nearby fallopian tube. This is known as ovulation. The chosen egg begins to travel down the fallopian tube, waiting and wishing for a sperm cell to come and fertilize it. It has a countdown of about 24 hours, which is around the length of time it can survive alone without a sperm cell fertilizing it. It's a pretty needy little guy. Meanwhile, the follicle left behind continues to grow and becomes known as the corpus luteum, which is basically Latin for yellow body. It starts releasing another chemical messenger called progesterone, which instructs the uterine lining to continue to grow. It also raises your body temperature. In fact, around ovulation, you are physically hotter by about 0.5 degrees Celsius or 1 degree Fahrenheit at least. The chosen egg continues to move down the fallopian tube. In this case, since you got your period, we know its state as sperm cell never showed up. You could say that the chosen egg is a little bit dramatic. It self-destructs 24 hours after being released from the follicle. At around day 24, the corpus luteum gets the message. It begins to gradually disintegrate and therefore also stops sending signals to the uterine lining to maintain itself. At this point, it's a bit like someone held a massive birthday party and no one showed. Your uterine lining starts to shed, as if your uterus is crying blood. You're back where you started and you're now on your period. So, you're back to day 1. The amount you bleed differs not only between you and other women, but also for you yourself. The normal volume of blood leaving your body per period, which is about 2 to 7 days long, can be anything from 5 milliliters to 80 milliliters. That's around 1 to 16 teaspoons of blood. Your reproductive system isn't one to give up though, and whilst you're bleeding, your other ovary is starting to mature a new batch of immature eggs and follicles. The party has just been rescheduled. This cycle continues to occur unless you get pregnant. That's a whole other story, which we don't have time to go into today. So there you have it. If you just had your first period, congratulations. A feast might not have been prepared for you, but go and have some chocolate to celebrate. Take care of yourself. No matter what stage of life or periods you're in, your body just did an awesome thing and you should be proud of it. There's so much more to explore, and we're so excited to talk more about all things women and health. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button. We love you and we'll see you next time. Love from Over.